Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Welcome crew, guys, gals, ghouls, friends, fiends, foes, whoever may be listening Beyond the Omniverse tonight. Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high. Get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 and on my computer. It is Sunday, February 9th, Monday, February 10th for those of you across the pond and beyond. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining me on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I'm your host TessaTNT, and we are broadcasting live from the Mile High Clubhouse tonight. If you're listening live right now, you may be listening to us on KPNL Radio, which you can find at KPNL Radio at kpnl-db.com. If you'd like to watch as well as listen, you can go to YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch under We Are Paradox Media. And if you want to listen in your free time, whether you're working it or working out, feel free to look us up wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we'll be there. Alright, so tonight is story time, and we're going to be reading Stephen King's Insomnia. Just make sure everything's working here. Excuse me. He made a tremendous effort and tore his fingers open. The shimmering blue blades also opened, making a small slit in the black egg. It screamed, and two bright, jagged flashes of red light raced across its surface. Ralph let his fingers together and watched the shears growing from their tips snap shut, cutting through dense black stuff that was part shell and part flesh. He cried out. It was not pain he felt exactly, but a sense of awful weariness. This is what bleeding to death must feel like, he thought. Something inside the bag gleamed bright gold. Ralph gathered all his strength and attempted to open his fingers for another cut. At first he didn't think he was going to be able to do it. They felt as if they had been stuck together with crazy glue. And then they drew apart, widening the slit. Now he could almost see the object inside, something small and round and shiny. Really only one thing it can be, he thought. And then his heart suddenly fluttered in his chest. The blue blades flickered. Lois, help me. She seized his wrist. Ralph felt strength roar into him in big, fresh volts. He watched, bemused, as the shears solidified again. Now only one of the blades was blue. The other was a pearly gray. Lois screaming inside his head, Hit it now! He brought his fingers together again, and this time the blades cut the death bag wide open. It uttered one last wavering shriek, turned entirely red, and disappeared. The shears growing from the tips of Ralph's fingers flickered out of existence. He closed his eyes for a moment, suddenly aware that big warm drops of sweat were running down his cheeks like tears. When the dark filled behind his eyelids, he could see crazy after images that looked like dancing scissors blades. Lois, are you okay? Yes, but drained. I don't have the slightest idea how I'm supposed to get back to those stairs under the tree. Let alone climb them. I'm not sure I can even stand up. Ralph opened his eyes, put his hands on his thighs, above the knees, and leaned forward again. Lying on the floor where the death bag had been was a man's wedding ring. He could easily read that it had been engraved on the wider inner curve HD ED 8587. Helen Dipnew and Edward Dipnew married on August 5th, 1987. It was what they had come for. It was Ed's token. All that remained now was to pick it up, slip it into his watch pocket of his pants, find Lois's earrings, and get the hell out of there. As he reached for the ring, a flicker of verse slipped through his mind. Not Stephen Dobbins this time, but J.R.R. Tolkien, who had invented the hobbits Ralph had last thought of in Lois's cozy picture-filled living room. It had been almost 30 years since he had read Tolkien's story of Frodo, Gandalf, and Sauron, the Dark Lord, a story which contained a token very similar to this one. Now that he thought about it, the lines were momentarily as clear as scissors blades had been only moments before. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. I won't be able to pick it up, he thought. It will be as tightly bound to the will of Ka as Lois and I are, and won't be able to pick it up. Either that, or it will be like grasping a live high-tension wire, and I'll be dead before I know it's happening. Except he didn't really believe either of those things was going on. If the ring was not his for the taking, why had it protected the death bag? If the ring was not his for the taking, why had the forces which stood behind Clotho and Lachesis and Dorrance, he couldn't forget Dorrance, set him and Lois upon this journey in the first place? One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, Ralph thought, and closed his fingers around Ed's wedding ring. For a moment he felt a deep, glassy pain in his hand and wrist and forearm. At the same moment, the softly singing voices of objects which Atropos had hoarded here rose in a great harmonic shout. Ralph made a sound, perhaps a scream, perhaps only a moan, and lifted the ring up, clenched it tightly in his hand. A sense of victory sang in his veins, like wine or like Ralph. He looked at her, but Lois was looking down at where Ed's ring had been, her eyes dark with mixture of fear and confusion. Where Ed's rings had been, Ed's ring still was. It lay exactly as it had lain, glimmering gold circlet with HD-ED 8587 inscribed around the inner arc. Ralph felt an instant of dizzy disorientation and controlled it with an effort. He opened his hand, half expecting the ring to be gone in spite of what his senses told him. But it still lay in the center of his palm, neatly enclosed with the fork where his lifeline, diverged, glimmering in the baleful red light of this nasty place. HD-EB 8587. 2 rings were identical. Section 8. Get some water really quick. One in his hand, one on the floor. Absolutely no difference, at least none that Ralph could see. Lois reached for the ring which had replaced the one Ralph had picked up, hesitated, then grasped it. As they watched, ghost gold glowed just above the chamber's floor, then solidified into a third wedding band, like the other 2. HD-ED 8587 was inscribed on the inner curve. Ralph found himself thinking of yet another story, not Tolkien's long tale of the ring, but a story by Dr. Seuss, which he had read, one of Carolyn's sister's kids, back in the 50s. That was a long time ago, but he had never completely forgotten the story, which had been richer and darker than Dr. Seuss's usual jingle-jangle nonsense about rats, wombats, and troublesome cats. It was called The 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins, and Ralph supposed it really wasn't any wonder that the story had come to mind now. Poor Bartholomew was a country hayseed who had the bad luck to be in the big city when the king happened by. You were supposed to take your hat off in the presence of that august personage, and Bartholomew had certainly tried, but without any luck. Each time he took his hat off, another one, identical to the last, appeared beneath it. Ralph, what's happening? What does it mean? He shook his head without answering, eyes moving from the ring on his palm to the one in Lois's hand to the other one on the floor. Around and around and around. The 3 rings, all of them identical, just like that, was just like a fish. Ha was like a sand dune. Ha was like a will that didn't want to stop but only to roll on, crushing whatever might happen to be in its path. A will of many spokes. But most of all, perhaps, Caw was like a ring, like a wedding ring. He suddenly understood what all the talk on the hospital roof and all of Dorance's efforts to explain hadn't been able to convey. Ed's undesignated status, coupled with Tripus's discovery of the poor, confused man, had conveyed a tremendous power upon him. The door had opened and a demon called the Crimson King had strolled through, one that was stronger than Clotho, Lachesis, Atropus, any of them. And it didn't intend to be stopped by Derry Old Croc like Ralph Roberts. Ralph? One ring to rule them all, Lois, run one ring to find them. What are you talking about? What do you mean? He patted his watch pocket, feeling the small yet momentous bulge that was Ed's ring. He reached out and grasped her shoulders. The replacements, the false rings, are spokes, but this one is the hub. Take away the hub, and the wheel can't turn. Are you sure? He was sure, all right. He just didn't know how to do it. Yes, now come on. Let's get out of here while we can. Ralph sent her beneath the overloaded dining room table first, then dropped to his knees and followed. He paused halfway under and looked back over his shoulder. He saw a strange and terrible thing. Although the buzzing sound had not returned, the death bat was reknitting itself around the replacement wedding ring. Already the bright gold had dimmed to a ghostly circlet. He stared at it for several moments, fascinated, almost hypnotized, then tore his eyes away with an effort and began to crawl after Lois. Section 9. Ralph was afraid that they would lose valuable time trying to navigate their way back through the maze of corridors which crisscrossed Atropus's storehouse of keepsakes. But that turned out not to be a problem. Their own footprints, fading but still visible, were there to guide them. He began to feel a little stronger as they put the terrible little room behind them, but Lois was now flageling badly. By the time they reached the archway between the storehouse and Atropus's filthy apartment, she was leaning on him. He asked if she was all right. Lois managed a shrug and a small, tired smile. Most of my problem is being in this place. It doesn't really matter how high up we go, it's still foul and I hate it. Once I get some fresh air, I think I'll be fine, honestly. Ralph hoped that she was right. As he ducked under the arch into Atropus's apartment, he was trying to think of a pretext by which he could send Lois on ahead of him. That would give him an opportunity to give the place a quick search. If that didn't turn up earrings, he would have to assume that Atropus's was still wearing them. He noticed her slip his hanging below the hem of her dress again, opened his mouth to tell her, and saw a flicker of movement from the tail of his left eye. He realized that they had been a lot less cautious on the return trip, partly because they were worn out, and now they might have to pay a high price for dropping their guard. "Lois, look out!" Too late. Ralph felt her arm jerked away as the snarling creature in the dirty tunic seized her about the waist and dragged her backward. Atropus's head only came to her armpit, but that was enough to allow him to hold his rusty blade over her. When Ralph made an instinctive lunge at him, Atropus brought the straight razor down until it was touching the pearl cord which drifted up from the crown of her head. He bared his teeth at Ralph in an unspeakable grin. "Not another step, Shorts. Not one." Well, he didn't have to worry about Lois's errant earrings anymore, at least. They glittered a murky, pinkish red against the tiny lobes of Atropus's ears. It was more the sight of them than the shout that stopped Ralph where he was. Scalpel drew back a little, but only a little. "Now, Shorts, you took something of mine just now, didn't you? Don't try to deny it. I know, and now you're going to give it back." The scalpel returned to Lois's balloon string. Atropus caressed it with the flat of the blade. "You give it back, or this bitch is going to die here in front of you. You can stand there and watch the sack turn black. So what do you say, Short Staff? Hand it over." Chapter 26, Section 1. Atropus's smile shone out, full of repulsive triumph and full of fear. He caught you flat-footed. He's got his scalpel to Lois's balloon string and his hand around her throat, but he's still scared to death. Why? "Come on, quit wasting time, shithead. Give me the ring." Ralph reached slowly into his watch pocket and grasped the ring, wondering why Atropus hadn't killed Lois outright. Surely he didn't intend to let either of them go. "He's afraid I might hammer him with another one of those telepathic karate chops." Excuse me. "And that's just for starters. I think he's also afraid of screwing up, afraid of the entity that's running him, afraid of the Crimson King. You're scared of the boss, aren't you, my filthy little friend?" He held the ring up between the thumb and forefinger of his right hand and peeked through it again. "Come and get it, why don't you? Don't be shy." Atropus's face nodded with rage. The expression twisted his nervy, gloating grin into a cartoon scowl. "I'll kill her, Shorts, didn't you hear me? Is that what you want?" Ralph slowly and deliberately raised his left hand. He made a sawing gesture in the air with it, and was gratified to see Atropus wince when the edge of the palm turned momentarily toward him. "If you even nick her with that blade, I'll hit you so hard you'll need a pocket knife to dig your teeth out of the wall. And that's a promise." "Just give me the ring, Shorts." "They can't lie," Ralph thought suddenly. "I can't remember if I was actually told that or just intuited it. But I'm sure it's true. They can't lie. I can, though. I'll tell you what, Mr. A. Promise me it's a push, and I'll give it to you." Atropus gave him a narrow look in which doubt and suspicion were mingled. "A push? What do you mean, a push?" "Ralph, no!" He glanced at her, then back at Atropus. He raised his left hand to scratch his cheek without considering how the gesture would look to the little bald doctor. The scalpel was pressed against Lois's balloon string again in tries, this time hard enough to dent it and create a dark splotch at the point of contact. It looked like a blood blister. Great bands of sweat stood up on Atropus's brow, and when he spoke, his voice was a panicky shriek. "Don't you go throwing any of your freight thunderbolts at me. A woman dies if you do." Ralph lowered his hand in a hurry, then put both of them behind his back like a penitent child. His wedding ring was still folded into his hand, and now, almost without thinking about it, he tucked it back into his pocket of his pants. It was only then that he was completely sure he didn't mean to give up the ring, even if it cost Lois her life. Both of them their lives. He didn't mean to give up the ring. But perhaps it wouldn't come to that. A push means we both walk away, Mr. A. I give you the ring, you give me back my lady friend. All you have to do is promise not to hurt her. What do you say? No, Ralph, no. What Atropus said was nothing. His eyes glittered at Ralph with fiery, hateful impotence. If ever his long life he'd wished for the ability to lie, Ralph supposed he must be wishing it at that moment. All it would take was, okay, it's a deal, and the ball would be right back in Ralph's court. But he couldn't say that because he couldn't do that. He knows he's in a nasty corner, Ralph thought. It really doesn't matter if he cuts her cord or lets her go. He must think I mean to flash fry him in either case, and he's not wrong. How much damage can you actually do to him, sweetheart? Carolyn asked doubtfully from the place she kept inside his head. How much juice have you got left after cutting open the death bag around the wedding ring? The answer, unfortunately, was not much. Maybe enough to singe his bald head, but probably not enough to saute it. And the answer, unfortunately, was not much. Maybe enough to singe his bald head. Then Ralph saw something he didn't like. The edge of panic, quality, in Atropus's grin was being replaced by cautious confidence. And he felt those mad eyes crawling avidly over him, his face, his body, but mostly his aura. Ralph had a sudden clear vision of the mechanic using a dipstick to find out how much oil was left in an automobile crankcase. Do something, Lois begged with her eyes. Please, Ralph. But he didn't know what to do. He was completely out of ideas. Atropus's smile took on a gloating, nasty edge. You're unloaded short stuff, ain't ya? Gee, that's sad. Hurt her, and you'll find out. You sawed-off piece of shit. Atropus's grin went on widening. You couldn't give a rat a hot foot with what you've got left. Why don't you just be a good boy and hand over the ring before I... Oh, you bastard. It was Lois. She was no longer looking at Ralph. She was looking across the room into the mirror where Atropus no doubt checked the fit and tilt of his latest fashion accents. Rosalie's bandana, say, or Bill McGovern's Panama. Her eyes were wide and full of fury, and Ralph knew exactly what she was seeing. Those are mine, you rotten little thief! She shoved violently backward, using her greater weight to slam Atropus against the side of the archway. A startled grunt escaped him. The hand holding the scalpel flew upward. The blade dug dry scales of dirt from the wall. Lois turned toward him, her face knotted in an angry snarl, a look so un-our Lois that McGovern might have fainted in shock at the sight of it. Her hands clawed at the sides of his face, reaching for his ears. One of her fingers dug into his cheek. Atropus yapped like a dog whose paw had been stepped on, then grabbed her by the waist again and whirled her back around. He turned the scalpel's blade inward, getting ready to slash. Ralph shook the forefinger of his right hand at it in a scolding gesture. A flash of light so pallid it was almost invisible shot out from the nail and struck the scalpel's tip, momentarily knocking it away from Lois's balloon string, and that was all there was. Ralph sensed that his personal armory was now empty. Atropus bared his teeth at him from over Lois's shoulder as she bucked and twisted in his arms. She was not trying to get away either. She was trying to turn and attack him. Her feet flowed out as she threw all her weight back against him again, trying to squash him against the wall behind them, and without having the slightest idea of what he meant to do. Ralph lunged forward and dropped to his knees with his hands out. He looked like a manic suitor making a strenuous marriage proposal. And one of Lois's thrashing feet came close to kicking him in the throat. It snatched at the hem of her slip, and it came free in a slithery little rush of pink nylon. Meanwhile, Lois was still yelling. "Miserable little thief! Here's something for you. How do you like it?" Atropus uttered a squeal of pain, and when Ralph looked up, he saw that Lois had buried her teeth in his right wrist. His left hand, the one holding the scalpel, flailed blindly at her balloon string, missing it by less than an inch. Ralph sprang to his feet, and still with no clear idea of what he was doing, pulled Lois's pink half-slip over Atropus's slashing hand, and his head. "Get away from him, Lois, run!" She spat out the small white hand and stumbled toward the barrel-head table in the center of the room, wiping Atropus's blood from her mouth with atavistic loathing, but the dominant expression on her face was still one of anger. Atropus himself, for the moment, just a bawling, writhing shape under the pink half-slip, groped after her with his free hand. Ralph slipped it away and shoved him back against the side of the archway. "No, you don't, my friend. Not at all. Let me go, you bastard. You can't do this." And the weirdest thing of all is that he really believes that, Ralph thought. He's had it his own way for so long that he's completely forgotten what short-timers can do. I can fix that, I think. Ralph remembered how Atropus had slashed Rosalie's balloon string after the dog had licked his hand, and his hatred for his stuttering, leering, complacently insane creature suddenly exploded in his head like a rotten green road flare. He grabbed one side of Lois's slip and twisted his fist twice around it in a savage winding-up gesture, pulled it so tight that Atropus's features stood out in a pink nylon death mask. Then, just as the blade of the scalpel popped through the fabric and began to cut it open, Ralph whirled Atropus around, using the slip as a man might use a sling to roll a stone, and sent him flying across the archway. Damage might have been less if Atropus had fallen, but he didn't. His feet knocked against each other but never quite crossed. He hit the rock facing of the archway with a thud, voiced a muffled scream of pain, and dropped to his knees. Spots of blood bloomed on Lois's half-slip like flower petals. The scalpel had disappeared back through the slit that it had made in the cloth. Ralph sprang after Atropus just as it reappeared and lengthened original cut, freeing the bald creature's staring, bewildered face. His nose was bleeding, so were his forehead and right temple. Before he could begin to get up, Ralph grabbed the slippery pink bulges that were his shoulders. "Stop it, I'm warning you, Shorts. I'll make you sorry you were ever Ralph ignored his pointless bluster and slammed Atropus forward hard. The midget's arms were still tangled in the slip, and he caught the floor with nothing but face. His shriek was part amazement, mostly pain. Incredibly, Ralph felt Lois in the back of his mind telling him that enough was enough. Not to really hurt him, not to hurt the pint-sized psychotic who had just tried to kill her. Atropus attempted to roll over. Ralph knee-dropped him in the middle of the back and knocked him flat again. "Don't move, friend. I like you just the way you are." He looked up at Lois and saw that her amazing fury had departed as suddenly as it had come. Like some freak weather phenomenon, a tornado perhaps, that touches down out of the clear blue, rips the top of a barn off, and then disappears again. She was pointing at Atropus. "He's got my earrings, Ralph. The nasty little thief has got my earrings. He's wearing them." "I know, I saw." One snarling side of Atropus's face poked out of the slit in the nylon, like the face of the world's ugliest baby at the moment of its birth. Ralph could feel the muscles of the small creature's back trembling beneath his pinioned knee. He remembered an old proverb he'd read somewhere, maybe at the end of a salad tea-bag string. He who takes a tiger by the tail dare not let go. Now in this unlikely den beneath the ground, and feeling like a character in a fairy tale concocted by a lunatic, Ralph thought he had achieved a sort of divine understanding of that proverb. Through a combination of Lois's sudden rage and plain old shit-ass luck, he had wound up at least temporarily on top of the scuzzy little fuck. The question, and a fairly pressing one at that, was what to do next. The hand holding the scalpel lashed up, but the stroke was both weak and blind. Ralph avoided it easily, sobbing and cursing, not afraid, even now, but clearly hurting, and all but consumed with impotent rage. Atropus flailed at him again. "Let me up, you overgrown short-time bastard, silly old white hair, ugly wrinkle face. I look a lot better than that just lately, my friend, haven't you noticed? Asshole, stupid short-time asshole. I'll make you sorry. I'll make you so sorry." Well, Ralph thought, at least he's not begging. I almost would have expected him to start begging by now. Atropus continued to flow weakly with the scalpel. Ralph ducked 2 or 3 of these strokes easily, then slid one hand toward the throat of the creature lying beneath him. "Ralph, no, don't!" He shook his head at her, not knowing if he was expressing annoyance, reassurance, or both. He touched Atropus's skin and felt him shudder. The bald dog uttered a choked cry of revulsion, and Ralph knew exactly how he felt. It was sickening for both of them, but he didn't take his hand away. Instead, he tried to close it around Atropus's throat, and wasn't very surprised to find he couldn't do it. Still, hadn't Lucchesi said that only short-timers could oppose the will of Atropus? He thought so. The question was, how? Beneath him, Atropus laughed nastily. "Please, Ralph, please just get my earrings and we'll go." Atropus rolled his eyes in her direction, then looked back at Ralph. "Did you think you could kill me, Shorts? We'll guess again." No, he hadn't thought it, but he'd needed to find out for sure. "Life's a bitch, ain't it, Shorts? Why don't you just give me back the ring? I'm going to get it sooner or later, I guarantee you that. Fuck you, you little weasel." Tough talk, but talk was cheap. The most pressing question was still unanswered. What the hell was he supposed to do with this monster? Whatever it is, you won't be able to do it with Lois standing there and watching you. A cold voice that was not quite Carolyn's advised him. She was fine when she was pissed off, but she's not pissed off now. She's too tender-hearted for whatever's going to happen next, Ralph. You've got to get her out of here. He turned toward Lois. Her eyes were half closed. She looked ready to crumple at the base of the archway and go to sleep. "Lois, I want you to get out of here right now. Go up the stairs and wait for me under the The scalpel flashed up again, and this time it almost sliced off the end of Ralph's nose. He recoiled and his knees slid on nylon. Atropus gave a mighty heave and came within a whisker of rolling out from under. At the last second, Ralph shoved the little man's head flat again with the heel of his hand. That, it seemed, was allowed by the rules, and replanted his knee. "Ow! No, stop it! You're killing me!" Ralph ignored him and looked at Lois. "Go on, Lois. Go on up. I'll be there as soon as I can. I don't think I can climb out on my own. I'm too tired." "Yes, you can. You have to, and you can." Atropus subsided again, for the moment at least, a small, gasping engine under Ralph's knee, but that was a long way from being enough. Time was passing topside, passing fast, and right now, time was real. And it was the real enemy, not Ed DePnew. "My earrings. I'll bring them when I come, Lois, I promise." Making what looked like a supreme effort, Lois straightened and looked solemnly at Ralph. "You shouldn't hurt him, Ralph. Not if you don't have to. It's not Christian." "No, not at all Christian." A capering little creature deep inside Ralph's head agreed. "Not Christian, but still. I can't wait to get started. Go on, Lois. Leave him to me." She looked at him sadly. "It wouldn't do me any good to ask you to promise not to hurt him, would it?" He thought about it, then shook his head. No, but I'll promise you this much. It won't be any harder than he makes it. Is that good enough? Lois considered carefully, then nodded. Yes, I think that will do, and maybe I can make it back up if I take it slow and easy, but what about you? I'll be fine. Wait for me under the tree. All right, Ralph. He watched her cross the filthy room, Helen's sneaker bobbing from one wrist. He ducked beneath the arch between the apartment and the stairway and slowly started up. Ralph waited until her feet had disappeared from view, then turned back to Atropos. Well, Chumley, here we are. Two old pals reunited. What should we do? Should we play? You like to play, don't you? Atropos immediately renewed his struggle, simultaneously waving his scalpel above his head and trying to buck Ralph off. Quit it! Get your hands off me, you old faggot! Atropos thrashed so wildly that kneeling on him now was like kneeling on a snake. Ralph ignored the yelling and bucking and the blindly waving scalpel. Atropos's whole head was sticking out of the slip, which made things a lot easier. He grabbed Lois's earrings and tugged. They stayed where they were, but earned him a hearty pain scream from Atropos. Ralph leaned forward, smiling a little. For pierced ears, aren't they, pal? Yes, goddammit. To quote you, life's a bitch, ain't it? Ralph seized the earrings again and ripped them free. There were two small fans of blood as the minute holes in the lobes of Atropos's ears became flaps. The old man's scream was as sharp as a new drill bit. Ralph felt an uneasy mixture of pity and contempt. Little bastard's used to hurting other people, but not being hurt himself. Maybe he's never been hurt himself. Well, say hello to the other half-lives, pal. Stop it, you can't do this to me. I've got a newsflash for you, buddy. I am doing it. You just get with the program. What do you think you're going to accomplish by this, Shorts? It'll happen anyway, you know. All those people at the Civic Center are going to go bye-bye, and taking the ring won't stop it. Don't I know it, Ralph thought. Atropos was still panting, but he had stopped thrashing. Ralph felt able to look away from him for a moment and send his eyes on a quick tour of the room. He supposed what he was really looking for was inspiration. Even a small bolt would do. Don't I know it, Ralph thought. Can I make a suggestion, Mr. A? A's your new little pal and playmate. I know you're busy, but you ought to find time to do something about this place. I'm not talking about getting it in House Beautiful or anything like that, but sheesh, what a sty. Atropos, simultaneously sulky and wary. Do you think I give a fuck what you think, Shorts? He could only think of one way to proceed. He didn't like it, but he was going to go ahead just the same. He had to go ahead. There was a picture in his mind that guaranteed it. It was a picture of Ed Dupnew flying toward Derry from the coast in a light plane, one with either a crate of high explosive or tank of nerve gas stowed in the nose. What can I do with you, Mr. A? Any ideas? The response was immediate and unequivocal. Let me go, that's the answer. The only answer. I'll leave you alone, both of you. Leave you for the purpose. You'll live another 10 years, hell, maybe another 20. It's not possible. Or impossible. All you and the little lady have to do is butt out, go home, and when the Big Bang comes, watch it on the TV news. Ralph tried to sound as if he were honestly considering this. And you'd leave us alone? You'd promise to leave us alone? Yes. Atropos's face had taken on a hopeful look, and Ralph could see the first traces of an aura springing up around the little creep. It was the same low and nasty red as the pulsing glow which lit the apartment. You know something, Mr. A? Atropos, looking more hopeful than ever. Know what? Ralph shot one hand forward, grabbed Atropos's left wrist, and twisted it hard. Atropos shrieked in agony. His fingers loosened on the handle of the scalpel. Ralph plucked it free with the ease of a veteran pickpocket lifting a wallet. I believe you. Section 2. Give it back! Give it back! Give it back! Give it! In his hysteria, Atropus might have gone on shrieking this for hours, so Ralph put a stop to it in the most direct way he knew. He leaned forward and slashed a shallow vertical cut down the back of the big bald head, poking out of the hole in Lois's half-slip. No invisible hand tried to repel him, and his own hand moved with no trouble at all. Blood, a shocking amount of it, well out of the line sight. The aura around Atropus had now gone to the dark and baleful red of an infected wound. He shrieked again. Ralph rocked forward and spoke chumly into his ear. Maybe I can't kill you, but I can certainly fuck you up, can I? And I don't need to be loaded with psychic juice to do it either. This little honey will do just fine. He used the scalpel to cross the first cut he'd made, making a lowercase T on the back of Atropus's head. Atropus shrieked and began to flail wildly. Ralph was disgusted to discover that the part of him, the capering gremlin, was enjoying this enormously. If you want me to go on cutting, you go on struggling. If you want me to stop, then you stop. Atropus became still at once. Okay, now I'm going to ask you a few questions. I think you'll find it in your best interest to answer them. Ask me anything, whatever you want. Just don't cut me again. That's a pretty good attitude, Pally, but I think there's always room for improvement, don't you? Let's see. Ralph sliced down again, this time opening a long gash in the side of Atropus's skull. A flap of skin peeled loose, like badly glued wallpaper. Atropus howled. Ralph felt a cramp of revulsion in the pit of his stomach, and was actually relieved. But when he spoke, at Atropus, he took great pains not to let the feeling show. Okay, that's my motivational lecture, Doc. If I have to repeat it, you'll need crazy glue to keep the top of your head from flying off in a high wind. Do you understand me? Yes, yes. And do you believe me? Yes, rotten old white hair, yes. Okay, that's good. Here's my question, Mr. A. If you make a promise, are you bound by it? Atropus was slow in answering, an encouraging sign. Ralph laid the flat of the scalpel's blade against his cheek to hurry him up. He was rewarded with another scream and instant cooperation. Yes, yes, just don't cut me again. Please don't cut me again. Ralph took the scalpel away. The outline of the blade burned on the little creature's unlined cheek like a birthmark. Okay, Sunshine, listen up. I want you to promise you'll leave me and Lois alone until the rally at the Civic Center is over. No more chasing, no more slashing, no more bullshit. Promise me that. Fuck you. Take your promise and shove it up your ass. Ralph was not one to put out timber by this. His smile, in fact, widened because Atropus hadn't said, I won't. And even more important, Atropus hadn't said, I can't. He had just said, no. Just a little backsliding, in other words, and easily remedied. Steeling himself, Ralph ran the scalpel straight down the middle of Atropus's back. The slip split, the dirty white tunic beneath it split, and so did the flesh underneath the tunic. Blood poured out in a sickening flood, and Atropus's tortured, welling shriek beat at Ralph's ears. You too, Mort. Good to see ya. He leaned over and murmured into the small ear again, grimacing and avoiding the blood as best he could. I don't like doing this anymore, Chumley. In fact, about 2 more cuts and I'm going to throw up again, but I want you to know that I can do it, and I'm going to keep on doing it until you either give me the promise I want or until the force that stopped me from choking you stops me again. I think if you wait for that to happen, you're going to be one hurting unit, so what do you say? Do you want a promise, or do you want me to peel you like a grape? Atropus was blubbering. It was a nauseating, horrible sound. You don't understand. If you succeed in stopping what's been started, the chances are slim, but it's possible that you might. I will be punished by the creature you call the Crimson King. Ralph clamped his teeth together and slashed down him. Again, his lip pressed so tightly together that his mouth looked like a long-healed scar. There was a faint tug as the scalpel's blade slid through gristle, and then Atropus's left ear tumbled to the floor. Blood poured out of the hole on the side of his head, and his scream this time was loud enough to hurt Ralph's ears. They're sure a long way from being gods, aren't they? Ralph thought. He felt sick with horror and dismay. The only real difference between them and us is that they live longer, but they're a little harder to see, and I guess I'm not much of a soldier. Just looking at that, blood makes me feel like passing out. Shit. Alright, I promise. Just stop cutting me. No more. Please, no more. That's a start, but you're going to have to be more specific. I want to hear you say that you promise to stay away from me and Lois, and Ed too, until the rally at the Civic Center is over. He expected more wiggling and weaseling, but Atropos surprised him. I promise. I promise to stay away from you, from the bitch, and you're running around with. Lois, say her name, Lois. Yeah, her, Lois Chase. I agree to stay away from her, and you too, from all of you, just as long as you don't cut me anymore. Are you satisfied? Is it good enough, goddamn you? Ralph decided he was satisfied, or as satisfied as any man can be when he's deeply sickened by his own methods and actions. He didn't believe there were any trapdoors hidden in Atropos's promise. The little bald man knew he might pay a high price later for giving in now, but in the end, that hadn't been able to offset the pain and terror Ralph had inflicted on him. Yes, Mr. A, I think it's good enough. Ralph slid off his small victim with his stomach rolling in a sensation. It had to be false, didn't it? That his throat was opening and closing like the valve of a clam. He looked at the blood-spattered scalpel for a moment, then cocked his arm back and threw it as hard as he could. It flew, end for end, through the arch and disappeared into the storeroom beyond. Good riddance, Ralph thought. At least I didn't get much on myself. There's that. He no longer felt like vomiting. Now he felt like crying. Atropos got slowly to his knees and looked around with the dazed eyes of a man who survived a killer storm. He saw Zero lying on the floor and picked it up. He turned it over in his small hands and looked at the strands of gristle trailing over in his backside. Then he looked up at Ralph. His eyes swam with tears of pain and humiliation, but there was something else in them as well. A rage so deep and deadly that Ralph recoiled from it. All his precautions seemed flimsy and foolish in the face of that rage. He took a blundering step backward and pointed at Atropos with an unsteady finger. Remember your promise. Atropos bared his teeth in a gruesome grin. He dangled a flap of skin on the side of his face, swung back and forth like a slack sail, and the raw flesh beneath it oozed and trickled. Of course I'll remember it. How could I forget it? In fact, I'd like to make you another. Two for the price of one, you might say. Atropos made a gesture Ralph remembered well from the hospital roof, spreading the first two fingers of his right hand in a V and then flicking them upward, creating a red arc in the air. Within it, Ralph saw a human figure. Beyond it, dimly glimpsed, as if seen through a mist of blood, was the Red Apple store. He started to ask who that was standing in the foreground on the curb of Harris Avenue, and then suddenly he knew. He looked up at Atropos with shocked eyes. Jesus, no, you can't. The grin in Atropos's face continued to widen. You know that's what I kept thinking about you, short time, only I was wrong. You are, too. Watch. Atropos moved his red finger slightly wider. Ralph saw someone wearing a Boston Red Sox baseball cap come out of Red Apple, and this time Ralph knew immediately whom he was looking at. This person called to the one across the street, and then something terrible began to happen. Ralph turned away, sickened from the bloody arc of the future between Atropos's small fingers, but he heard it when it happened. The one I showed you first belongs to the random shorts. To me, in other words, and here's my promise to you. If you go on getting in my way, what I've just shown you is going to happen. There's nothing you can do, no warning you can give, that will stop it from happening. But if you leave now, if you and the woman simply stand aside and let events take their course, then I will stay my hand. The vulgarities which formed so large a part of Atropos's usual discourse had been left behind like a discarded costume. And for the first time, Ralph had some clear sense of how truly old and malevolently wise this being was. Remember what the junkies say, Shorts. Dying is easy, living is hard. It's true saying. If anyone should know, it's me. So, what do you think? Having any second thoughts? Ralph stood in the filthy chamber with his head down and his fists clenched. Lois's earrings burned in one of them like small hot coals. Ed's ring also seemed to burn against him, and he knew there wasn't a thing in the world to stop him from taking it out of his pocket and throwing it into the other room after the scalpel. He remembered a story he'd heard in school about 1,000 years ago. The Lady or the Tiger had been called, and now he understood what it was to be given such a terrible power. And such a terrible choice. On the surface it seemed easy enough. What, after all, was one life against 2,000? But that one life... Yet really, it isn't as if anyone would ever have to know, he thought coldly. No one except maybe for Lois, and Lois would accept my decision. Carolyn might not have done, but they're very different women. Yes, but did he have the right? Octopus also read this in his aura. It was spooky how much the creature saw. Of course you do, Ralph. That's what these matters of life and death are really about. Who was the right? This time it's you. So what do you say? I don't know what I say. I don't know what I think. All I know is that I wish all three of you had left me the fuck alone. Ralph Roberts raised his head toward the root-riddled ceiling of Atropus's den and screamed. Chapter 27, Section 1. 5 minutes later, Ralph's head poked out of the shadows beneath the old leaning oak. He saw Lois at once. She was kneeling in front of him, peering anxiously through the tangle of roots at his upturned face. He raised a grimy, blood-streaked hand, and she took it firmly, holding him steady as he made his way up the last few steps, gnawed roots that were actually more like ladder rungs. Ralph wriggled his way out from under the tree and turned over onto his back, taking the sweet air in great long pulls of breath. He thought air had never in his whole life tasted so good. In spite of everything else, he was enormously grateful to be out, to be free. Ralph, are you all right? He turned her hand over, kissed her palm, then put her earrings where his lips had been. Yes, fine. These are yours. She looked at them curiously, as if he'd never seen the earrings. Those or any others before, and then put them in her pocket dress. You saw them in the mirror, didn't you, Lois? Yes, and it made me angry, but I don't think I was really surprised, not deep down. Because you knew? Yes, I guess I did. Maybe from when we first saw Atropus wearing Bill's hat, I just kept it, in the back of my mind. She was looking at him carefully, assessingly. Never mind my earrings right now. What happened down there? How did you get away? Ralph was afraid if she looked at him in that careful way for too long, she would see too much. He also had an idea that if he didn't get moving soon, he might never move again. His weariness was now so large, it was like some great encrusted object. A long-sunken ocean liner, perhaps, lying inside him, calling to him, trying to drag him down. He got to his feet. He couldn't allow either of them to be dragged down, not now. The news the sky told wasn't as bad as it could have been, but it was bad enough. It was 6 o'clock at least. All over Derry, people who didn't give a shit one way or the other about the abortion issue, the vast majority in other words, were sitting down to hot dinners. At the Civic Center, the doors would now open. 10K TV lights would be bathing them, and minicams would be transmitting live shots of early arriving pro-choice advocates driving past Dan Dalton, and a sign waving Friends of Life. Not far from here, people were chanting that old Friends of Adeptnew. One that went, "Hey, hey, Susan Day, how many kids did you kill today?" Whatever he and Lois did, they would have to do it in the next 60 to 90 minutes. The clock was ticking. Come on, Lois, we have to get moving. Are we going back to the Civic Center? No, not to start with. I think that to start with, we ought to. Ralph discovered that he simply couldn't wait to hear what he had to say. Where did he think they ought to go to start with? Back to Derry Home? The Red Apple? His house? Where did you go when you needed to find a couple of well-meaning, far from all knowing fellows who had gotten you and your close friends into a world of hurt and trouble? Or could you reasonably expect them to find you? Alright, well, on that note, boys and girls, we are going to our first music break. On this break, we have the lovely and talented Miss Mia Savage with her band Antidote for Savages with Lemurian Crypto. Our new reality, Let Me Be Your Home and Your Skeleton. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break. Welcome back, and thanks so much for joining us tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Tonight it is story time with me, TessaTNT. We've been reading Stephen King's Insomnia. I'm gonna get back into it here in just 1 second. Let me pull this up. Ralph discovered that he simply couldn't wait to hear what he had to say. Where did he think they ought to go to start with? Back to Dairy Home, the Red Apple, his house. Where did you go when you needed to find a couple of well-meaning but far from all-knowing fellows who had gotten you and your few close friends into a world of hurt and trouble? Or could you reasonably expect them to find you? They might not want to find you, sweetheart. In fact, they might actually be hiding from you. Ralph, are you sure he suddenly thought of Rosalie and knew. Park, Lois Strawford Park. That's where we have to go. But we need to make a stop on the way. He led her along the cyclone fence, and soon they heard the lazy sound of interwoven voices. Ralph could smell roasting hot dogs as well, and after the fetid stench of Atropus's den, the smell was ambrosial. A minute or two later, he and Lois stepped to the edge of the little picnic area near runway 3. Dorrance was there, standing at the heart of his amazing multicolored aura and watching as a light plane drifted down toward the runway. Behind him, Faye Chapin and Don Beasy were sitting at one of the picnic tables with a chessboard between them, and a half-finished bottle of Blue Nun near to hand. Stan and Georgina Eberly were drinking beer and twiddling forks with hot dogs impaled upon them in the heat shimmer. To Ralph, that shimmer was strangely dry pink, like coral-colored sand, above the picnic area's barbecue pit. For a moment, Ralph simply stood where he was, struck dumb by their beauty. The ephemeral, powerful beauty that was, he supposed, what short-time life was mostly about. Let me check this over here. I think this background music's a bit too loud. There we go. A snatch of song, something at least 25 years old, occurred to him. We are stardust, we are golden. Lawrence's aura was different, fabulously different, but even the most prosaic of the others glittered like rare and infinitely desirable gemstones. Oh, Ralph, do you see? Do you see how beautiful they are? Yes. What a shame they don't know. But was it? In the light of all that had happened, Ralph wasn't so sure. And he had an idea, a vague but strong intuition he could never have put into words, that perhaps real beauty was something unrecognized by the conscious self, a work that was always in progress, a thing of being rather than seeing. Come on, dumbwit, make your move, a voice said. Ralph jerked, first thinking the voice was speaking to him, but it was Faye talking to Don Beasy. You're slower than an old creepin' Jesus. Never mind, Don said. I'm thinking. Think till hell freezes over, Slick, and it's gonna be mate in 6 moves. Ron poured some wine into a paper cup and rolled his eyes. Oh, booger snot, he cried. I didn't realize I was playing chess with Boris Spassky. I thought it was just plain old Faye Chapin. I apologize all to hell and gone. That's a riot, Don. And act like that, you could take it on the road and make $1 million. You won't have to wait too long to do it, either. You can start just 6 moves from now. Ain't you smart, Don said. You just don't know when to... Hush, Georgina Eberly said in a sharp tone. What was that? It sounded like something blew up. That was Lois sucking a flood of vibrant, rainforest green from George's aura. Ralph raised his right hand and curled it into a tube around his lips and began to inhale a similar stream of bright blue light from Sam Eberly's aura. He felt fresh energy fill him at once. It was as if fluorescent lights were going on in his brain. But that vast sunken ship, which was really no more or less than 4 months' worth of mostly sleepless nights, was still there, and still trying to suck him down to the place where it was. The decision was still right there, too. Not yet made one way or the other, but only deferred. Stan was also looking around. No matter how much his aura Ralph took, and he had to draw off a great deal of it, it seemed to him, the source remained as densely bright as ever. Apparently, what they had been told about the all but endless reservoirs of energy surrounding each human being had been the exact literal truth. "Well," Stan said. "I did hear something." "I didn't," Faye said. "'Cause not. You're deaf as dirt," Stan replied. "Stop interrupting for just 1 minute, can't you? I started to say it wasn't a fuel tank because there ain't no fire or smoke. Can't be that Don farted either, 'cause there ain't no squirrels dropping dead out of the trees with their fur burn off. I guess it must have been one of those big Air National Guard trucks backfiring. Don't worry, darling. I'll protect you." Protect this," Georgina said, slapping one hand onto the crook of her elbow and curling her fist at him. She was smiling, however. "Oh boy," Faye said. "Take a peek at old Dor." Dell looked at Dorrance, who was smiling and waving in the direction of the Harris Avenue extension. "Who do you see there, old fella?" Don Vesey asked with a grin. "Ralph and Lois," Dorrance said, smiling radiantly. "I see Ralph and Lois. They just came out from under the old tree." "Yep," Stan said. He shaded his eyes and pointed directly at them. This delivered a wallop to Ralph's nervous system, which only abated when he realized Stan was just pointing where Dorrance was, waving, and look, there's Glenn Miller coming out right behind him. God damn. Georgia threw an elbow, and Stan stepped away nimbly, grinning. "Hello, Ralph. Hello, Lois." "Dorrance? We're going to Strawford Park, is that right?" Dorrance grinned happily. "I don't know. It's all the time business now, and I'm through with it. I'm going back home soon and read Walt Whitman. It's going to be a windy night, and Whitman's always best when the wind blows." Lois, sounding nearly frantic. "Dorrance, help us." Dora's face faltered, and he looked at her solemnly. "I can't. It's passed out of my hands. Whatever's done will have to be done by you and Ralph now." "Ugh," Georgia said. "I hate it when he stares that way. You could almost believe he really does see someone." She picked up her long-handled barbecue fork and began to roast her hot dog again. "Has anybody seen Ralph and Lois, by the way?" "No," Don said. "They're shacked up in one of those X-rated motels down the coast with a case of beer and a bottle of Johnson's baby oil," Stan said. "The giant economy-sized bottle. I told you that yesterday." "Filthy old man," Georgina said, this time throwing the elbow with a little more force and a lot more accuracy. "Ralph, Dorrance, can't you give us any help at all? At least tell us if we're on the right track?" For a moment he was sure that Dor was going to reply. Then there was a buzzing, approaching drone from overhead, and the old man looked up. His daffy, beautiful smile resurfaced. "Look," he cried, "an old grumman yellow bird, and a beauty." He jogged to the chain-link fence to watch the small yellow plane land, turning his back to them. Ralph took Lois's arm and tried to smile himself. It was hard going. He thought he had never felt quite so frightened and confused in his entire life, but he gave it the old college try. "Come on, dear, let's go." Section 2. Ralph remembered thinking this while they'd been making their way along the abandoned rail line, which had eventually taken them back to the airport. Walking was not exactly what they were doing. It seemed more like gliding. They went from the picnic area at the end of Runway 3 back to Strawford Park in that same like beat, carried along by an invisible conveyor belt. As an experiment, he stopped walking. The houses and storefronts continued to flow wildly past. He looked down at his feet to make sure, and yes, They were completely still. It seemed the sidewalk was moving, not him. Here came Mr. Dugan, head of the Dairy Trust Loan Department, decked out in the customary three-piece suit and rimless eyeglasses. As always, he looked to Ralph like the only man in the history of the world to be worn without an asshole. He had once rejected Ralph's application for a bill payer loan, which Ralph supposed might account for a few of his negative feelings about the man. Now he saw that Dugan's aura was the dull, uniform gray of a corridor in a VA hospital, and Ralph decided that didn't surprise him much. He held his nose like a man forced to swim across a polluted canal and pass directly through the banker. Dugan did not so much as twitch. That was sort of amusing, but when Ralph glanced at Lois, his amusement faded in a hurry. He saw the worry on her face, and the questions she wanted to ask, questions to which he had no satisfactory answers. Ahead was Strawford Park. As Ralph looked, the streetlights came on suddenly. The little playground where he and McGovern, Lois too, more often than not, had stood watching the children play, was almost deserted. 2 junior high kids were sitting side by side on the swings, smoking cigarettes and talking. The mothers and toddlers who came here during the day hours were all gone now. Ralph thought of McGovern, of his ceaseless morbid chatter and his self-pity. So hard to see when you first got to know him, so hard to miss once you'd been around him for a while, but both of them lightened and somehow turned into something better by his irreverent wit and his surprising, impulsive acts of kindness. He felt deep sadness still over him. Short-timers might be stardust, and they might be golden as well, but when they were gone, as the mothers and babies who'd made brief playtime visits here on summer afternoons. Ralph, what are we doing here? The death bag's over the Civic Center, not Strawford Park. Ralph guided her to the park bench where he had found her several centuries ago, crying over the argument she'd had with her son and daughter-in-law, and over her lost earrings. Down the hill, the 2 courtesans glimmered in the deepening twilight. Ralph closed his eyes. I am going mad, he thought, and I'm headed there on the express rather than the local. Which is it going to be, the lady or the tiger? Ralph, we have to do something. Those lives, those thousands of lives. In the darkness behind his closed lids, Ralph saw someone coming out of the Red Apple store, a figure in dark corduroy pants and a red socks cap. Soon this terrible thing would start to happen again, and because Ralph didn't want to see it, he opened his eyes and looked at the woman beside him. Every life is important, Lois, wouldn't you agree? Every single one. He didn't know what she saw in his aura, but it clearly terrified her. What happened down there after I left? What did he do or say to you? Tell me, Ralph. You tell me. So, which was it going to be? The one or the many? The lady or the tiger? If he didn't choose soon, the choice would be taken out of his hand by nothing more than a simple passage of time. So which one? Which? Neither or both, he said hoarsely, unaware in his terrible agitation that he was speaking aloud, and on several different levels at once. I won't choose one or the other. I won't. Do you hear me? He leaped up from the bench, looking around wildly. Do you hear me? He shouted. I reject this choice. I will have both, or I will have neither. On one of the paths north of them, a wino who had been poking through a trash barrel, searching for returnable cans and bottles, took one look at Ralph, then turned and ran. What he had seen was a man who appeared to be on fire. Lois stood up and grasped his face between her hands. Ralph, what is it? Who is it? Me? You? Because if it's me, if you're holding back because of me, I don't want... He took a deep, steadying breath and then put his forehead against hers, looking into her eyes. It's not you, Lois, and not me. If it was either of us, I might be able to choose, but it's not, and I'll be goddamned if I'm going to be a pawn any more. He shook her loose and took a step away from her. His aura flashed out so brilliantly that she had to raise her hand in front of her eyes. It was as if he somehow was exploding, and when his voice came, it reverberated in her head like thunder. Flodo, Lachesis, come to me, damn it, and come now. Section 2. Actually 3, sorry. He took 2 or 3 more steps and stood looking down the hill. The 2 junior high school boys sitting on the swings were looking up at him with identical expressions of startled fear. They were up and gone the moment Ralph's eyes lit on them, running flat out toward the lights of Witcham Street like a couple of deer leaving their cigarettes to smolder in the foot ditches beneath the swings. Clotho Lachesis! He was burning like an electric arc, and suddenly all the strength ran out of Lois's legs like water. She took one step backward and collapsed onto the park bench. Her head was whirling, her heart full of terror, and, below everything, was that vast exhaustion. Ralph saw it was a sunken ship. Lois saw it as a pit, around which she was forced to walk in gradually, tightening spiral, the pit into which she must eventually fall. Clotho Lachesis' last chance, I mean it! For a moment nothing happened, and then the doors of the portisans at the foot of the hill opened in perfect unison. Clotho stepped from one marked men, Lachesis from one marked women. Their auras, the brilliant green gold of summer dragonflies, glimmered in the ashy light of day's end. They moved together until their auras overlapped, then walked slowly backward toward the top of the hill that way, with their white-clad shoulders almost touching. They looked like a pair of frightened children. Ralph turned to Lois. His aura still blazed and burned. "Stay here." "Yes, Ralph." She let him get part way down the hill, then gathered her courage and called after him. "But I'll try to stop Ed if you won't, and I mean it." Of course she did, and his heart responded to her bravery. But she didn't know what he knew, hadn't seen what he had seen. He looked back at her for a moment, then walked down to where the 2 little bald doctors looked at him, with their luminous, frightened eyes. Section 4. Lachesis nervously. "We didn't lie to you, we didn't." Clotho even more nervously, if that was possible. "Depnew is on his way. You have to stop him, Ralph. You have to at least try. The fact is, I don't have anything, and your faces show it," he thought. Then he turned to Lachesis and was gratified to see the small bald man flinch from his gaze and drop his dark pupils. "Is that so? When we were in the hospital roof, you told us to stay away from Ed, Mr. L. You were very emphatic about that." Lachesis shifted uncomfortably and fidgeted with his hands. That is to say, we can be wrong. This time we were." Except Ralph knew that wrong wasn't the best word for what they had been. Self-deceived would be better. He wanted to scold them for it. No, tell the truth, he wanted to scold them for getting him into this shitting mess in the first place, and found he couldn't, because according to Old Door, even their self-deception had served the purpose. The side trip to High Ridge had, for some reason, not been a side trip at all. He didn't understand why or how that was, but he intended to find out, if finding out was possible. Let's forget that part of it for the time being, gentlemen, and talk about why all this is happening. If you want help from me and Lois, I think you better tell me." They looked at each other with their big, frightened eyes, then back at Ralph. Lachesis. "Ralph, do you doubt that all those people are really going to die? Because if you do—" "No, but I'm tired of having them waved in my face. If an earthquake that served the purpose happened to be scheduled for this area, and the butcher's bill came to 10,000 instead of just 2,000, and changed, you'd never even bat an eye, would you? So, what's so special about this situation? Tell me." Clotho. "Ralph, we don't make the rules any more than you do. We thought you understood that." Ralph sighed. "You're weaseling again, and I'm not wasting anybody's time but your own." Clotho uneasily. "All right. Perhaps the picture we gave you wasn't completely clear, but time was short and we were frightened, and you must see that, regardless of all else, those people will die if you can't stop Ed Depnew. Never mind all of them right now. I only want to know about one of them, the one who belongs to the purpose and can't be handed over just because some designated fisher comes along with a head full of loose screws and plane full of explosive. Who is it you feel you can't give up to the random? Who? It's Day, isn't it? Susan Day." Lachesis. "No. Susan Day is part of the random. She is none of our concern, none of our worry. Who then? Clotho and the Chessies exchanged another glance. Clotho nodded slightly, and then they both turned back to Ralph. Once again, Lechessis flickered the first two fingers of his right hand upward, creating that peacock's fan of light. It wasn't McGovern, Ralph saw this time, but a little boy with blonde hair cut in bangs across his forehead and a hook-shaped scar against the bridge of his nose. Ralph placed him at once, the kid from the basement of High Ridge, the one with the bruised mother, the one who had called him and Lois angels. And a little child shall lead them, he thought, utterly flabbergasted. Oh my God. He looked disbelievingly at Clotho and the Chessies. Am I understanding? All this has been about one little boy? He expected more waffling, but the reply from Clotho was simple and direct. Yes, Ralph. The Chessies. He's at the Civic Center now. His mother, whose life you and Lois also saved this morning, got a call from her babysitter less than an hour ago, saying she'd cut herself badly on a piece of glass and wouldn't be able to take care of the boy tonight after all. By then it was too late to find another sitter, of course, and this woman has been determined for weeks to see Susan Day, to shake her hand, even give her a bag if possible. She idolizes the Day woman. Ralph, who remembered the fading bruises on her face, supposed that was idolatry. He could understand. He understood something else even better. The babysitter's cut hand had been no accident. Something was determined to place that little boy with the shaggy blonde bangs and the smoke-reddened eyes at the Civic Center, and was willing to move heaven and earth to do it. His mother had taken him not because she was a bad parent, but because she was as subject to human nature as anyone else. She hadn't wanted to miss her one chance at seeing Susan Day. That was all. No, it's not all, Ralph thought. She also took him because she thought it would be safe, with Pickering and his daily bred crazies all dead. It must have seemed to her that the worst she'd have to protect her son from tonight would be a bunch of sign-waving pro-lifers. That lightning couldn't possibly strike her and her son twice on the same day. Ralph had been gazing off toward Witcham Street. Now he turned back to Clotho and the Chessies. You're sure he's there? Positive? Clotho. Yes, sitting in the upper north balcony next to his mother with a McDonald's poster to color in some storybooks. Would it surprise you to know that one of the stories is The 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins? Ralph shook his head. At this point, nothing would surprise him. The Chessies. It's the north side of the Civic Center that the Muse plane will strike. This little boy will be killed instantly if steps are not taken to prevent it. And that can't be allowed to happen. This boy must not die before his scheduled time. Section 5. The Chessies was looking earnestly at Ralph. The fan of blue-green light between his fingers had disappeared. We can't go on talking like this, Ralph. He's already in the air, less than 100 miles from here. Soon it will be too late to stop him. That made Ralph feel frantic, but he held his place just the same. Frantic, after all, is how they wanted him to feel, how they wanted both of them to feel. I'm telling you that none of that matters until I understand what the stakes are. I won't let it matter. Clotho, listen then. Every now and again, a man or woman comes along whose life will affect not just those about him or her, or even all those who live in the short-time world, but those on many levels above and below the short-time world. These people are the great ones, and their lives always serve the purpose. If they are taken too soon, everything changes. The scales cease to balance. Can you imagine, for instance, how different the world might be today if Hitler had drowned in the bathtub as a child? You believe me, the world would be better for that, but I can tell you that the world would not exist at all if it had happened. Suppose Winston Churchill had died of food poisoning before he ever became Prime Minister. Suppose Augustus Caesar had been born dead, strangled on his own umbilical cord. Yet the person we want you to save is of far greater importance than any of these. Damn it, Lois and I already saved this kid once. Didn't that close the books? Return him to the purpose? The Chessies patiently. Yes? But he is not safe from Ed Dipnew because Dipnew has no designation in either random or purpose. Of all the people on Earth, only Dipnew can harm him before his time comes. If Dipnew fails, the boy will be safe again. He'll pass his time quietly until his moment comes and he steps upon the stage to play his brief but crucially important part. One life means so much then. Lachesis. Yes, if the child dies, the tower of all existence will fail, and the consequences of such fall are beyond your comprehension, and beyond ours as well. Ralph stared down at his shoes for a moment. His head seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. There was an irony here, one he was able to grasp easily in spite of his wariness. Atropos had apparently set Ed in motion by inflaming some sort of messiah complex which might have been pre-existing. A byproduct of his undesignated status, perhaps. What Ed didn't see, and would never believe if told, was that Atropos and his bosses on the upper levels intended to use him not to save the Messiah, but to kill him. He looked up again into the anxious faces of the two little bald doctors. Okay, I don't know how I'm supposed to stop Ed, but I'll give it a shot. Clotho and Lachesis looked at each other and smiled identically, and very human, broad smiles of relief. Ralph raised a cautioning finger. Wait. You haven't heard all of it. Their smiles faded. I want something back from you. One life. I'll trade the life of your 4-year-old boy for... Section 6. Lois didn't hear the end of that. His voice dropped below the range of audibility for a moment, but when she saw first Clotho and then Lachesis begin shaking their heads, her heart sank. Lachesis. I understand your distress, and yes, Atropos can certainly do as he threatens, yet you must surely comprehend that this one life is hardly as important as, Ralph. But I think it is, don't you see? I think it is. What you two guys need to get through your heads is that, to me, both lives are equally. She lost him again, but had no problem hearing Clotho in the depth of his distress. He was also wailing. This is different. This boy's life is different. Now she heard Ralph clearly speaking, if speech was what it was, with a fearless, relentless logic that made Lois think of her father. All lives are different. All of them matter, or none matters. That's only my short-sighted, short-time view, of course, but I guess you boys are stuck with it. Since I'm the one with the hammer, the bottom line is this. I'll trade you, even up, the life of yours for the life of mine. All you have to do is promise, and the deal's on. Lachesis, Ralph, please. Please understand that we really must not. There was a long moment of silence. When Ralph spoke, his voice was soft, but still audible. It was, however, the last completely audible thing Lois heard in their conversation. There's a world of indifference between cannot and must not, wouldn't you say? Clotho said something, but Lois caught only an isolated trade might possibly be. Phrase, Lachesis shook his head violently. Ralph replied, and Lachesis answered by making a grim little scissoring gesture with his fingers. Surprisingly, Ralph replied to this with a laugh and a nod. Clotho put a hand on his colleague's arm and spoke to him earnestly before turning back to Ralph. Lois clenched her hands in her lap, willing them to reach some sort of agreement, any agreement that would keep Ed Dipnew from killing all those people while they just stood here yattering. Suddenly the side of the hill was illuminated by brilliant white light. First Lois thought it came down from the sky, but that was only because myth and religion had taught her to believe the sky was the source of all supernatural emanations. In reality, it seemed to come from everywhere, trees, sky, ground, even from herself, streaming out of her aura like ribbons of fog. There was a voice then, or rather a voice. It spoke only 4 words, but they echoed in Lois's head like iron bells. It may be so. She saw Clotho, his small face a mask of terror and awe, reach into his back pocket and bring out his scissors. He fumbled and almost dropped them, a nervous blunder that made Lois feel real kinship for him. Then he was holding them up with one handle in each hand and the blades open. Those 4 words came again. It may be so. This time they were followed by a glare so bright that for a moment Lois believed she must be blinded. She clapped her hands over her eyes but saw, in the last instant when she could see anything, that the light had centered on the scissors Clotho was holding up like a two-pronged lightning rod. There was no refuge from that light. It turned her eyelids and upraised, shielded hands to glass. The glare outlined the bones of her fingers like X-ray pencils as it streamed through her flesh. From somewhere far away she heard a woman who sounded suspiciously like Lois Chase, screaming at the top of her mental voice. "Turn it off! God, please turn it off before it kills me!" And at last, when it seemed to her that she could stand no more, the light did begin to fade. When it was gone, except for a fierce blue after-image that floated in the new darkness like a pair of phantom scissors, she slowly opened her eyes. For a moment she continued to see nothing but that brilliant blue cross, and thought she had indeed been blinded. Then, as dim as a developing photograph at first, the world began to resurface. She saw Ralph, Clotho, and the Chessies lowering their own hands and peering around with the blind bewilderment of a nest of moles turned up by the blade of Harrow. The Chessies was looking at the scissors in his colleague's hands as if he had never seen them before, and Lois was willing to bet he never had seen them as they were now. The blades were still shining, shedding eldritch, fairy glimmers of light in misty droplets. The Chessies. Ralph, that was... She lost the rest of it, but his tone was that of a common peasant who answers a knock at the door of his hut and finds that the Pope has dropped by for a spot of prayer and a little confession. Clotho was still staring at the blades of the scissors, Ralph also looking, but at last lifted his gaze to the bald doctors. Ralph? The hurt. The Chessie speaking like a man emerging from a deep dream. Yes. Won't last long, but agony will be intense. Change your mind, Ralph? Lois suddenly afraid of those shining scissors. She wanted to cry out to Ralph, tell him to never mind his one, to just give them their one, their little boy. She wanted to tell him to do whatever it took to get them to hide those scissors again. But no words came from either her mouth or her mind. Ralph, in the least, just wanted to know what to expect. Clotho, ready? Must be. Tell them no, Ralph, she thought at him. Tell them no. Ralph, ready. The Chessies understand. Terms he has. And the price. Ralph, impatient now. Yes, yes, can we please just... Clotho with immense gravity. Very well, Ralph. It may be so. The Chessies put an arm around Ralph's shoulders. He and Clotho led him a little farther down the hill to the place where the younger children started their downhill sled runs in the winter. There was a small flat area there, circular in shape, about the size of a nightclub stage. When they reached it, Chessie stopped Ralph, then turned him so he and Clotho were facing each other. Lois suddenly wanted to shut her eyes and found she couldn't. She could only watch and pray that Ralph knew what he was doing. Clotho murmured to him. Ralph nodded and slipped out of McGovern's sweater. He folded it and laid it neatly on the leaf-strewn grass. When he straightened again, Clotho took his right wrist and held his arm out straight. He then nodded to the Chessies, who unbuttoned the cuff of Ralph's shirt and rolled the sleeve to the elbow in 3 quick turns. With that done, Clotho rotated Ralph's arm so it was wrist up. The fine tracery of blue veins just beneath the skin of his forearm was poignantly clear, highlighted in delicate strokes of aura. All of this was horribly familiar to Lois. It was like watching a patient on a TV doctor show being prepped for an operation. Except this wasn't TV. The Chessies leaned forward and spoke again, although she still couldn't hear the words. Lois knew he was telling Ralph this was his last chance. Ralph nodded, and although his aura now told her that he was terrified of what was coming, he somehow even managed a smile. When he turned to Clotho and spoke, he did not seem to be seeking reassurance but rather offering a word of comfort. Clotho tried to return Ralph's smile, but without success. The Chessies wrapped one hand around Ralph's wrist, more to steady the arm, or so it seemed to Lois, than to actually hold it immobile. He reminded her of a nurse attending a patient who must receive a painful injection. Then he looked at his partner with frightened eyes and nodded. Clotho nodded back, took a breath, then bent over Ralph's upturned forearm, with its ghostly tree of blue veins glowing beneath the skin. He paused for a moment, then slowly opened the jaws of the scissors with which he and his old friend traded life for death. Section 7. Lois staggered to her feet and stood swaying back and forth on legs that felt like lumber. She meant to break the paralysis which had locked her in such a cruel silence, to shout at Ralph and tell him to stop, tell him he didn't know what they meant to do to him. Except he did. It was in the pallor of his face, his half-closed eyes, his painfully thin lips. Most of all, it was in the blotches of red and black, which were flashing across his aura like meteors, and in the aura itself, which had tightened down to a hard blue shell. Ralph nodded at Clotho, who brought the lower scissor blade down until it was touching Ralph's forearm just below the fold of the elbow. For a moment, the skin only dimpled, and then a smooth, dark blister of blood formed where the dimple had been. The blade slid into the blister. When Clotho squeezed his fingers, bringing the razor-sharp blades together, the skin on either side of the lengthwise cut snapped back with the suddenness of window shades. Subcutaneous fat glimmered like melting ice in the fierce blue glow of Ralph's aura. Lachesis tightened his hold on Ralph's wrist, but so far as Lois could tell, Ralph did not even make a first instinctive effort to pull back, only lowered his head and clenched his left fist in the air like a man giving a black power salute. She could see the cords in his neck standing out like cables, not a single sound escaped. What do you want? What?
Sorry. My French is allergy.
Alright, you silly dude. Get on out of here.
It's happening.
What? Oh, that kid's crazy. Now that this terrible business was actually begun, Clotho proceeded with a speed which was both brutal and merciful. He cut rapidly down the middle of Ralph's forearm to his wrist, using the scissors the way a man will to open a parcel, which has been heavily taped, guiding the blades with the fingers and bearing down with the thumb. Inside Ralph's arms, tendons gleamed like cuts of flank steak, blood ran in freshets, and there was a fine scarlet spray each time an artery or a vein was severed. Soon fans of backspatter decorated the white tunics of the two small men, making them look like little doctors than ever. When his blades had at last severed the bracelets of fortune at Ralph's wrist, the operation took less than 3 seconds but seemed to last forever to Lois. Clotho removed the dripping scissors and handed them to Lachesis. Ralph's upturned arm had been cut open from the elbow to the wrist in a dark furrow. Clotho clamped his hands over this furrow at its point of origination, and Lois thought, now the other one will pick up Ralph's sweater and use it as a tourniquet. But Lachesis made no move to do that. He merely held the scissors and watched. For a moment the blood went on flowing between Clotho's grasping fingers, and then it stopped. He slowly drew his hands down Ralph's arm, and the flesh which emerged from his grip was whole and firm, although seamed with a thick white ridge of scar tissue. Lois! This voice was not coming from inside her head, nor from down the hill. It had come from behind her, a soft voice, almost cajoling. Latropus? No, not at all. He looked down and saw green and somehow sunken light glowing all around her. It rayed through the spaces between her arms and her body, between her legs, even between her fingers. It rippled her shadow ahead of her, scrawny and somehow twisted like the shadow of a hanged woman. It caressed her with the heatless fingers the color of Spanish moss. Turn around, Lois. At that moment, the last thing on earth Lois Chase wanted to do was turn around and look at the source of that green light. Turn around, Lois. See me, Lois. Come into the light, Lois. Come into the light. See me and come into the light. It was not a voice which could be disobeyed. Lois turned as slowly as a toy ballerina whose clogs have grown rusty and her eyes seem to fill up with St. Elmo's fire. Lois came into the light. On that note, boys and girls, we're going to go to our second music break. Then once again, we'll be listening to Miss Mia Savage with her band Antidote for Savages. She's going to be singing Bury Me in Heaven, Not a Phase, To Your Grave, and The Bottom Line. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
resources, no record, no work, no job, no savings or money. Just a choice right now between fear and love. Choice right now between fear and love.
Welcome back, and thanks so much for joining me. Excuse me. Tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies, we've been reading Stephen King's book Insomnia. I was thinking about showing a couple videos, but I don't know. I think we'll save that. I was thinking about saving it for next weekend, but I don't know if it'll be be relatable then. So let me go ahead and see if we can open these up and play them. All right. So one is from Mindseed TV, and it's a pretty dang good one. It's about all the airplane stuff that's been happening. Let me go over here and turn off this background music for story time, since we're not going to be doing that. Sorry, best I can. Right. Here we go.
In the past month, there have been more airplane crashes than in the last 10 years combined.
Incident on board.
Holy Cessna 150.
What you're going to see in today's video is a timeline of events and also contradictions being made by news outlets and the government.
The drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown.
So buckle up, because today's video is going to be one hell of a ride. Initially, Homeland Security and the White House denied any involvement with these mysterious drones, stating that they had no information, but that they weren't a threat.
You're telling me we don't know what the hell these drones are in New Jersey are? Is that correct?
That's right. We have no evidence at this time that the reported drone sightings pose a national security or a public safety threat.
Which everybody upon hearing that knew didn't make any sense.
We just want some answers. We need to know what's going on. We need to know why it's there. And we need to know for certain what, if any, risk it poses. And if the answer is none, we need to be able to tell people with a straight face why that is.
Yeah, they're everywhere. They're all over the place. They are literally over everywhere.
And while they were telling the public don't worry about it, behind closed doors, multiple secret briefings were being held about these drones. But when questioned, they remained silent.
These are just hobbyist drones. They're not military drones. Why is it a classified briefing on the Capitol Hill?
I'd have to refer you to Congress on that.
And they started mocking the entire situation. They made jokes about Star Wars, laughed it off as hallucinations.
I would probably have to think back to the words of a very wise prophet, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who said, "These aren't the drones you're looking for."
Fast forward, and suddenly the White House changes its story completely. Now they claim that the drones were ours and that they were authorized by the FAA the entire time.
The drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA.
Does anyone else see the problem with that statement? If these drones were approved by the FAA, why did the FAA impose emergency flight restrictions in certain areas?
In response to those recent drone sightings in the Northeast, the FAA has issued a ban on flying drones in parts of New Jersey.
Also, why were military air bases temporarily shut down if these were all FAA approved?
Wright-Patterson Air Force Base airspace was closed for about 4 hours Friday night after small unidentified drones were spotted near the base. The FBI and the White House still say they don't know the origin.
It doesn't make sense. And they say the reason for the drones was research and various reasons.
Were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons.
Which basically means absolutely nothing. Various reasons could be anything. So technically, we still have absolutely zero answers about these unknown aircrafts that are still currently in our skies right now. Then there's the recent Black Hawk crash in DC. First, we heard news reports about 4 survivors being rescued from the crash. Yeah, that went out to the public.
Responders are finding survivors there in those waters.
Then, the news reports started saying that there were 0 survivors from the crash.
So far, officials say there is no word of any survivors.
That's a little strange, isn't it?
Are finding survivors there in those waters.
A government official also stated on live television that Black Hawks don't have standard black boxes in them as a regular airplane would, which would make the investigation much more difficult. They would have to rely on recorded radio transmissions instead from air traffic.
It's critical to note that this aircraft, the Black Hawk, the Lima model Black Hawk specifically, does not have your standard voice recorder black box that people are used to hearing about. You're going to have to rely on the external recordings of the tower air traffic control.
Yet now, news stations are all reporting that a black box was recovered from the wreckage of the Black Hawk.
On Friday, the NTSB said it found the black box from inside the Army helicopter.
What black box? I thought Black Hawks didn't have a black box. What are we talking about now? And then there's this, something that most people don't even know. Just a few months ago, in October 2024, Lockheed Martin publicly demonstrated that a Black Hawk helicopter could be flown fully autonomously from over 300 miles away.
Are we really going to fly this optimally piloted autonomous Black Hawk in Connecticut from 300 miles away right here in Washington, D.C.? And the answer is a resounding yes, we're going to.
No pilot, no crew, just an algorithm. Now fast forward to 2025, a Black Hawk collides with a commercial airline. People have seen the wreckage of the airplane all over the news, but where's the helicopter? And if this was an accident, not a controlled event, how does a military pilot, one trained for evasive maneuvers to avoid enemy fire, fail to dodge a massive, well-lit passenger airplane that's 5 times its size? Even President Trump went on live TV saying that there was no way this helicopter should have hit this airplane.
You had a helicopter that had the ability to stop. I have helicopters. You can stop a helicopter very quickly. It had the ability to go up or down. It had the ability to turn.
Many are now under the impression that the Black Hawk was being flown remotely, possibly as part of a test or worse, a demonstration gone wrong maybe. And then the news released a live interview of an ex-military pilot who explained the situation.
There's a system of low-level helicopter routes throughout the capital region that goes above a lot of the freeways and along the Potomac, and it is a very normal, routine thing for military helicopters to fly along those routes.
However, when a military pilot tried to address her concerns on social media, her video was froze midway through and her account was banned.
I'm telling you right now, they can do me for saying it, but under no circumstance.
Where's the thing at? Look, you can skip the 29 seconds. Same thing.
And it's still just, yeah.
Still there.
I'm telling you right.
Go to the account banned.
This leaves many to believe that the story that we hear is only the one that they want us to hear, and that the narrative they're trying to push is the only thing that they're allowing through outlets.
There have been multiple angles of this crash caught on camera. That, yes, will be a huge help to investigate.
And just 48 hours later, another plane crash in Pennsylvania sparked more controversy.
A fatal medical jet crash in Northeast Philadelphia.
The NTSB pulling double duty investigating 2 plane crash sites on the East Coast.
But this one, many people believe that maybe it wasn't an airplane at all, but maybe a missile. The footage shows an object descending at incredible speeds. Its explosion far larger than what we would expect from a small aircraft. And the footage of the wreck looks like a war zone.
Plane just crashed on Cottman Avenue, yo.
People online started making comparisons to failed military test footage, and they noticed something unsettling.
The F-35 plunging to the ground and bursting into flames.
Jets falling out of the sky typically don't look like that.
There was 12 plane crashes in the last few days, and a couple of those looked like missile strikes. I think something's going on.
And here's where things get even stranger. 2 key details of the footage have people questioning the official story. Number 1, why does it appear that the object coming down from the sky was already on fire? If this was a plane, what caused it to fall in the first place? And number 2, the sound that was captured by the object as it was shooting downwards towards the Earth, it eerily resembles the whistle of an oncoming missile. Then there's the final radio communication between the pilot and flight control before the crash happened. And this part, it's hard to ignore.
Return right heading 2900, runway 24, clear for takeoff. Medevac Med Service 056, contact Philly departure 123.8.
Suddenly a voice can be heard that doesn't sound like the person the pilot was originally communicating with at flight control.
123.8, Mike Tango Sierra, 056 Medevac. Thank you, good day.
Medevac Med Service 056, Northeast Tower, contact Philly 123.8.
Then as the pilot tries to contact flight control, he gets silence.
Medevac Med Service, Northeast Tower. Medevac Med Service 056, Northeast Tower, you on frequency?
And when they finally do return, you can hear a bit of static, and you can hear a voice that sounds like it's being muffled by the static. And what does it say? You're messing with the wrong people? That's what it sounds like, and that's what a lot of people online heard as well. Many people have analyzed this footage, and some are convinced that it's just interference. Other people believe that this was a direct warning. Now let's take a look at a timeline of plane crashes and flight issues in the last 2 months.
A small plane crashed into a Southern California building.
It's a Cessna 152 based out of Redlands.
We have some breaking news to get to in Temple City, where a small plane has crashed.
Holy
Tonight, terrifying moments on board a United Airlines flight to Washington from Nigeria. The Boeing 787 forced to turn around after an incident on board that injured dozens.
Strangely, these crashes all began shortly after the mysterious drones began appearing, first in New Jersey and eventually all around the United States.
What are those things on there?
Drones. Completely normal.
One incident in California was even released that an airplane was hit by an unidentified drone.
Breaking news involving the super scoopers that come to Southern California each year to help find the wildfires. And today, one of them collided with an illegal drone.
That plane right there struck a drone. This drone left a football-sized hole inside of the wing of that plane.
Another engine explosion was reportedly caused by what news claimed was a bird strike.
Moments after takeoff, a bird strike leading to engine failure.
But later, reports proved that whatever went into the engine was a metallic object, as the propeller blades were severely damaged. But this wasn't a secluded event. We've seen a lot of footage within the last month of airplane engines catching fire mid-flight.
A United airplane caught fire at Bush's airport right there.
Come on, I'll get along. Please remain seated until further
The other news tonight and the alarming images from on board that passenger jet that took off from Boston, smoke suddenly filling the cockpit and the cabin.
There's even one video where a pilot addresses a loud bang and engine failure to the passengers aboard the airplane. After landing the plane safely, he announces that he's been flying for over 35 years and never encountered such a problem.
I've been flying 35 years. This is my first engine failure.
Over 35 years and nothing. Now 2025 hits and there are more problems than ever. So could this be evidence of sleeper cells being activated, coordinated attacks happening on U.S. soil, or something even bigger? On New Year's Day 2025, two shocking attacks took place. One in New Orleans, where an ex-military member drove his truck into a crowd of people.
There are at least two other potential, again, not confirmed, potential improvised explosive devices.
And one in Las Vegas, where an ex-Green Beret parked a Cybertruck in front of a Trump hotel and detonated. But what's peculiar about this is the manifesto that the ex-Green Beret left behind right before the event took place.
On December 31st at 10:42 a.m., what we have been seeing with drones, he puts that in quotes, he says drones, is the operational use of gravitic propulsion systems powered aircraft by most recently China and the East Coast, but throughout history, the U.S.
He claimed that both the U.S. and China possess anti-gravitic aircrafts, with China being potentially years ahead of ours.
China has been launching them from the Atlantic from submarines for years, but this activity recently has picked up.
But what's even more concerning is he suggested that these aircrafts could hover over the White House at any moment, putting the U.S. in a silent checkmate.
They are the most dangerous threat to national security that has ever existed. They basically have an unlimited payload capacity and can park it over the White House if they want it. It's checkmate.
But here's where it gets even stranger. The vehicle he chose to detonate, a Cybertruck, a vehicle built bulletproof from the factory, designed to contain a blast within its reinforced frame. And it wasn't just any Cybertruck, this particular model could be driven autonomously, something an ex-Green Beret would have known.
And I do still not have confirmation 100% that that is the individual that was inside of our vehicle.
And then there's this. The back of the truck was filled with fireworks set to explode in sync when the detonation took place. And it makes you wonder, was this an act of destruction? Or was it a calculated statement, not to damage buildings or harm civilians, but to force the world to pay attention? But pay attention to what? Could it be possible that our government has already realized we're in a checkmate and they're doing everything that they can to stop it from getting out to the public? We've seen an insane number of airplane accidents, mysterious drone sightings, and even direct attacks on American soil, all in the past month. And yet, instead of clear answers, we get contradictions, backtracking, silence. We're being fed distraction after distraction, but the real question is, distractions from what?
During exercises, the installation's mass notification system will be utilized. All drill messages will begin and end with the words, exercise, exercise, exercise.
Oh, hell no. I never heard that before. What the f***? The military base? Yes!
Is that from the military base?
Things are eerily beginning to resemble scenes from the movie Leave the World Behind. You know, the one produced by the Obamas, as in former United States President Barack Obama, who was privy to all sorts of top-secret classified information. Yeah, that one. Many people believe this wasn't even a movie, this was a documentary of things to come. And so far, we've seen boats run ashore, planes falling from the skies, strange animal behaviors, drones, and even red notes. Put all that together in your cup and sip it. And maybe the scariest possibility of all is, what if the United States already knows we've lost? What if this isn't a war waiting to happen, but one that's already over with? Not with bombs or bullets, but with information, technology, control. And while we're on the subject, did anyone else notice the colors, the drapes, the overall design of the stage during Trump's inauguration? Because that didn't scream America to me. It screams something else entirely. The red, the gold, the stars. Stay awake, stay questioning, because the truth isn't stranger than fiction. It's being buried beneath it.
That was a good one. And like I said, make sure you go over to MindStateTV and subscribe. I'm going to go to our next one here. And this is about...
So this is one of the...
AI. Alrighty, make sure this is all set up correctly. Okay.
So this is one of the strangest rabbit holes I have ever dug into when it comes to 2025. And since January, we have been having a lot of problems with planes. And it's like every single day there's something to talk about when it comes to that.
You cannot take your bags with you. You can't take that. You have to leave it right here.
You can't make this up. Just had to evacuate the plane because the tire blew as we took off.
We just had another one yesterday, and as I'm making this video, there were already 2 others. There's also a huge discussion right now if these things are possibly intentional or just a coincidence, and we're going to be taking a look into this.
To be honest, in my mind I thought, like, what if the rocket would call it the rocket? Right?
Medevac, med-service 056.
Now, there's no evidence to support that this is intentional, yet. But there are crazy things happening, such as people who actually predicted these planes.
I woke up from very vivid dreams, and in the dreams, I see tech disruptions with the airline industry.
So there are a few questions here. Who are the people inside these planes? Why is this happening almost every day? Most people think that this can't be just a coincidence, but if it isn't, then what is happening? Well, there are a couple of theories. One of them is it's possibly someone hacking into these planes. The other one is solar flares, and there are other crazy theories that suggest that something sinister is going on.
If you can go over there right now. I'm coming out the gym. You see cars that wasn't even close to the plane. It's caught fire. They're completely done.
But before we go into this video, I want to say something very important. We're going to be exploring this topic with full respect and sensitivity to the families and people involved. So with that being said, let's deep dive into this bizarre rabbit hole. So Steamy a week ago posted this video explaining all of the incidents that started happening back in January.
The past 3 days in aviation has seen a total of 7 notable incidents. Today we had the American Airlines CRJ-700 crash in Washington DC, where a US military helicopter collided into it over the Potomac River. Yesterday there was 3 crashes in one day, with a Beechcraft 1900D that 19 people, the US Air Force F-35 that crashed in Alaska, and a Cessna S-550 Citation that crashed after takeoff in Venezuela. And on that very same day, a Max Air Boeing 737-400s had a nose gear collapse, causing an evacuation. And then, on January 28th, a Busan Air Airbus A321 suffered a major fire that has left the aircraft in a severely damaged state. On the same day as that, a Boeing 737-700 had to evacuate on the runway in Bolivia, as the plane suffered a fire in one of its engines.
That's a lot of incidents in just 3 days, is that it? But then, it didn't stop there. Actually, he didn't even mention the Cessna in January 7th that crashed on the ocean in Western Australia, he didn't mention this airplane in Japan that burst into flames at Tokyo Airport on January 2nd. He also did not mention the Cessna 525 in Brazil on January 10th. He also didn't mention this one in Santa Barbara, California. This was 1 week ago, and he didn't mention the Learjet 55 in Philadelphia that happened on January 31st. Now, these are a lot of problems with planes, but there were a couple of them that caught the attention of a lot of people, and that was the Learjet 55, and I'm going to show you guys why. There's also the military helicopter that crashed into a plane. That was also kind of suspicious. Doesn't the helicopter or the airplane have some sort of system to identify each other to avoid this type of crash? This is the first time, I guess, that something like this happens, and it's all happening now. At some point, this actually feels like I'm watching that movie Leave the World Behind. So let's just say that this is not just some sort of coincidence. Let's make a list of all of these things that are happening right now. So I asked ChatGPT for a list, and here we go. This is a very extensive list for just a month. Look at that. And it's still happening. We're going to take a look into these most recent events. We're going to map these things out. We're going to try to find the passenger list and try to find out if there's some sort of bizarre connection. So this is where it all starts. This is actually ridiculous. Look at this. The helicopter appears to try and collide with 3 other planes before hitting the American Airlines flight. There's a video of it, a flight pattern. And then Nick says just 24 hours before an American Airlines flight collided with the Black Hawk, another American flight had to abort landing due to a helicopter crossing its flight path at the same airport. Look at that. First near crash. Second near crash. We don't have altitude here, right? So a third near crash. Okay. Then I guess after that one, it makes some erratic moves, which is weird. Then it happens. Why? Why do we have helicopters flying that close to an airport? So Dan says, looks like an attempt to collide with other crafts. However, keep in mind this is in 2D and not 3D. We don't have altitude differences. I agree. In this other post by Nick, we can see that another airplane 24 hours before that also had to abort landing because of a helicopter flying nearby. Look at that. Yep. Clearly seems that these choppers are flying too close to these airplanes near this airport. Why is this happening? That's the main question we got to be asking ourselves. Why? There's a couple of theories here. One is that this was not a coincidence. A woman posted a video I'm going to show you guys.
US figure skaters that 1961 crashed the same way that these people passed away last night.
There's another theory that this has something to do with a problem with air traffic controllers. So Jefferson says, would this be due to air traffic controllers giving the wrong commands to helicopter pilots? So it seems that a lot of people think that the problem is related to air traffic controllers. So let's take a look into this. There's also this one over here. At the time of the crash, one air traffic controller worker was managing helicopters in some planes, a job normally done by 2 people. So it could be the case that they were short on air traffic controllers. Then there's this other theory that the helicopter, the Black Hawk helicopter, was actually flying with no pilots.
Your eyes are not playing tricks on you. There's no pilot inside this helicopter. It's 2022, so let's face it, we're used to seeing all types of vehicles operate themselves. From cars to boats, drones, even motorcycles. But some people might say there's something a little ominous about seeing a military-grade helicopter flying without a pilot.
Apparently in 2022, they started testing these things out, Black Hawk helicopters without pilots. Eddie says, I knew it. Now what about the people that were inside? What of them? Solve that, and then you have a story. Otherwise, it's still plausible speculation at best. I guess it is kind of shady, But at the same time, it is normal for choppers to do these exercises above the Potomac River.
Potomac River is a designated flight corridor for helicopters, and it's common to see aircraft operating in the area. A key difference in this scenario was the operating rules of the two aircraft.
Okay.
Flight 5342 was operating under instrument flight rules, which grants priority in controlled airspace. In contrast, PAT 25 was flying under visual flight rules, meaning it was required to maintain visual awareness of its surroundings to avoid other aircraft.
That kind of makes sense.
Moments before the collision, Air Traffic Control Tower at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport contacted PAT 25 to confirm whether they had the approaching aircraft in sight. At first, this seemed to indicate that they were aware of Flight 5342's presence. However, it now appears that PAT 25 may have mistakenly identified a different aircraft, possibly a departing flight from the same airport, as the one referred to by the tower. Tragically, this misidentification may have caused PAT 20.
Yeah, that really makes sense. That's one of the best explanations for now, but still it does not explain the sequence of events that have been happening this month and last month. So there's this other very strange coincidence. A woman posted this 2 days ago. So there were 14 members of figure skating inside that plane, including some young athletes called the rising stars of the sport. So this woman, eVideos26, posted this 6 days ago.
The U.S. figure skaters that died in 1961 crashed while approaching the airport, the Brussels airport in Belgium. The same way that these people passed away last night, approaching the airport, literally in Belgium. Last night, like after this crash happened, all of the air traffic control suffered a glitch at the Brussels airport. So all of the passengers from the same U.S. figure skating team that at Brussels airport in 1961, and then a huge glitch occurs and nobody can land or fly. Was that like a ghost thing?
Wait a minute, is this real? Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh. Belgium airspace reopens after short closure over technical issue. What was the technical issue? Air traffic control system used by Skies to operate the Belgium airspace was not functioning as required. What? This is the same thing they're saying about this one that happened in DC. Let's take a look at the comments. So Tally says, oh my god, 1961, the year Brussels, plus 64 passengers, the DC day, equals 2025. Both crashes happened on the first day of the Lunar New Year. What is going on here? So 2 days later, on January 31st, there was this Learjet 55 in Philadelphia. The way it goes down just does not look like a regular plane falling. It looks like something else. And then you got other perspectives, like this one. The way it nosedives, it's just an Ashton Forbes post. It's not a plane. What the heck is this? So from this angle, it really feels as if we're looking at something else. Look at the speed at which this thing goes down. This is... So because of these videos, most people started thinking that this, whatever it is that we're seeing here going down, is possibly not a plane. People like Philip were saying, I was skeptical, but this does look like it's moving too fast to be a plane. What's the source on this? We sure it's not edited? And she posts the original source coming in from Insider Paper. So after that, we had a lot of people doing live streams. And this is what people were asking. Now, how in the hell is there white, unburned piece of plane left? Why is that part of the plane so clean? So if this was, let's just say that it wasn't a plane, it was something else. There should be someone who saw something, right? Well, apparently there is this interview that was posted by Mr. Red Pills. Check this out.
Everything, but you just see the plane getting lower and lower. Then yesterday it was the plane. It's like, damn, what's going on? If you look up, if you can go over there right now. I'm coming out the gym. You see cars that wasn't even close to the plane. It's caught fire. They're completely done. You can't see. I showed you the pictures. It's messed up, man.
There's also this interview posted by Paul's Corner 21. It was described as a rocket.
Before that, to be honest, in my mind I thought, like, what if the rocket would the rocket, right? And there's always rockets coming in and stuff like that. And then I see things flying. Like, no way. And again, and you say it, you never know.
Okay, that's crazy. So he's describing it as a rocket, but there's a lot of people saying that that's because he doesn't know how to call it a airplane. It seems like his native language isn't English. And so everything here for now points that this could be a rocket instead of a plane. However, this audio that leaked suggests otherwise. Air traffic control trying to reach the Learjet 55 before it went down.
Medevac, med service 056 on departure, turn right heading 290, runway 24, clear for takeoff, wind 25010. Medevac, med service 056, contact Philly departure 123.8.
123.8, Mike Tango Sierra 056 Medevac. Thank you, good day.
Is that the pilot?
Medevac, med service 056, Northeast Tower, contact Philly 123.8.
Who was that?
Medevac Med Service, Northeast Tower. Medevac Med Service 056, Northeast Tower. You on frequency?
Medevac Mike Tango Sierra 056, Northeast Tower. How do you hear this transmission?
Medevac Med Service 056, Northeast Tower.
Oh my gosh, they're trying to reach it. What?
36098 Foxtrot, Northeast Ground, Roger. Standby 1. I'll get back to you when I can.
What was that? So there's something really weird about this audio. I'm not sure what it is, but then someone posted this. 55 seconds into the audio, the guy says, "You're with the wrong people." Let's play this audio. Okay, so that's weird. So that is apparently the response that the Learjet gave. And this person that's speaking doesn't seem to be American. Now, I'm not exactly sure if this person is saying you're with the wrong people or if he's saying you're talking to the wrong people. So this is all very strange. And there's also this theory from Bill Dautriv who says the plane crash has some extremely interesting flights around Mexico and yesterday to Haiti. It was not logged that was departing from Philly airport. This is Screaming Cartel hit to me. And this is the flight log again. And yeah. Let's just say it was the cartel. How do we explain all of these other incidents happening all over the world? So I found this explanation to be very interesting. What if someone is actually hacking into the plane systems and using them as rockets? This kind of reminds me of that movie, Leave the World Behind. But if this were to be the case, things would continue happening, right? Well, they have. We had passengers and crew of a United Airlines flight from Houston to New York evacuated after a reported engine issue. This is another video from Blondie Ashlyn.
You want to slot down? You cannot take your bags with you. You can't take them. You have to leave it right here.
Come on, I'll get longer.
Please remain seated until further.
No, it's so fire! Oh my God! Please get us out of here. So fire! This is jet.
4 days ago, we had this video uploaded by the original Amber Nicole. Check this out.
We can't make this. Just had to evacuate the plane because the tire blew as we took off. This is a United flight. We are on runway. Oh my God.
Then we had this airplane being evacuated.
Evacuate. Evacuate. Go, 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 go. Don't do your stuff. Don't leave your stuff.
But then I tracked the video, and apparently this is the one, and it was posted on November 18th, 2024. So apparently these things started happening in November, back when we had the drones and the orbs flying around, which is kind of weird. And yesterday we had Jackie posting this video. So we were sitting on the tarmac at SeaTac, and another plane ran into ours, just casually sliced into our tail. Very scary. This was supposedly in Seattle. It's basically happening on a daily basis. This cannot be a coincidence. So people are coming up with the craziest ideas to why this could be happening all over the world very rapidly. One of the possibilities is someone or something is hacking these planes. The other possibility are solar flares. So let's just say that in 2028, your house, your car, your airplane, your supermarket, your city will be run by an AI. And that AI will actually decide if you can do things or not, if you can go from one place to the other, if you can buy things, depending on your credit score system.
Month or so, how about this one? People counting. You want to take a deep dive into your dystopian future.
Sounds kind of crazy, but that's what a lot of people think that a smart city will be able to do. And there are projects for that to happen from 2028 onward.
Have you seen the line in Saudi Arabia? Well, if you thought that was crazy, then get ready for Tolosa, a $400 billion proposed smart city in the United States.
It scares a lot of people for many reasons. One of them is the movie Terminator and many others, movies in which AI takes control over everything and it does not end well.
Yeah. This little board here tells you how many times people have come through the park. Essentially, it tells you how many unconnected Wi-Fi devices there are in. So that would be everyone's phone. Imagine a lockdown scenario. 6 devices in this park at the moment that your federal might want it to be none. This will tell you. These sensors up in this light, the Wi-Fi connections, they're all interlocked. There will be facial recognition cameras in there. So, don't think you're just going to leave your phone at home. The cameras will pick you up.
The idea of a smart city in itself is kind of scary, and it truly depends on who is going to run the smart city, who is going to be behind the programming, and with what intention is it going to be programmed. So naturally, most people would not accept such a system, and this is when these airplanes possibly being hacked come in. They would ease the process in which people would start thinking, wait, there are too many planes, there are too many cars, we can't control all of them, we need an automated system. After all of these things happening with planes, the idea would naturally be implanted into most people.
I don't think nobody's safe. I think everybody needs to protect themselves by any means possible. And what can we do? What can we do? If it's happening now, what can we do? We had no control over that. Can't nobody expect that. You cannot see that coming.
Now let's just say that someone is possibly hacking these airplanes. This is where this video from Camilla Hurley comes in. She posted this on January 11th.
I woke up from very vivid dreams, and in the dreams I see tech disruptions with the airline industry happening in the last 2 weeks of January. So this is my opinion for entertainment only, but if you can avoid taking flights until between, let's say, January 23rd is popping into my head and the end of the month, then life might be easier for you.
This woman posted this 12 hours before it happened.
Hi everyone, I've been away for quite a while, but I do have a couple of predictions for 2025. So I have 2 predictions regarding planes. The first one I get is a commercial plane. There's a lot of people on board and there's a lot of people affected by it. It's basically some sort of surprise on a commercial airplane. Keep getting the feeling that it's someone who is on board and inside the plane, or someone who works for the airline is somehow involved in this, or possibly an airport worker.
Here is the post by Shell. To people coming later, she posted this about 12 to 13 hours before the American Airlines and Black Hawk. Sounds kind of far-fetched. I know, I agree with that. But then again, this is just a theory and not my theory.
Have you guys heard about the Hollywood Smart City? Building this by 2028? Essentially what they're going to do is rebuild the whole entire city to be these futuristic utopia type housing and the whole entire city is just going to be like extra futuristic. So you have to think, how are they going to get there? How could they just build it? They can't build it over everything that's already built. What are they going to tear it down, rebuild it? There's one very easy way.
So that's one crazy theory, but let's just say that it has nothing to do with anyone hacking the planes, nothing to do with smart cities. Could it have something to do with solar flares? So this is the list that I did of these bizarre things that are happening with planes since January. Not on this list, we also have the one that happened in Seattle. Also on this list, we have 2 other incidents that happened today on February 7th. So let's take a look at this map. The only pattern that I can find of looking at this map is this one over here. I'm not sure if this makes any sense at all. So this actually made me look into solar flares. So I went to ChatGPT, and apparently not. And apparently solar flares can. So taking a quick look at them, I found some interesting things. So let's check the dates, January 2nd and January 7th. Let's check this out. So apparently nothing that could explain the January 2nd and 7th airplanes. I have a minor flare happening on the 8th over here. Look at that. Now let's check 28th onward. So on the 28th we had something. And then on the 30th we have another one. So that, yeah, and another one on the 31st. So let's take a look at February 2nd and 6th. Let's see if this makes any sense at all. Okay. So we have something big happening on the 2nd there. A huge one on the 4th. And around February 6th, we have a huge one happening. So some of these flares actually coincide with the planes, some of them don't. And there were larger flares in the past that did not interfere with planes at all. So what's going on here? What do you think? Is it possibly just a coincidence and the internet is going crazy over this thing? Or is there something to it? Leave a comment, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button with the notifications on, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you very much for being here.
See, now that is crazy. Man, what is this person keep coming into my chat? Get out of here. Anyways, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight on Weird Expedia's Late Night Rockies. I had an awesome time reading to you and watching these trippy-ass videos. Thank you to all of our friends on Weird Media's Twitter, Periscope, iHeartRadio, wherever you're listening out there, Beyond The Omniverse tonight. Don't forget, we're all in this together. Together we can make the world a little better, and together we are Paradox Media, because without you,